Okay, we are going to go over a series of stretches for recovery. I recommend you do these after your long runs, also on any recovery days you might have scheduled. In my opinion, I think it's best if you start your stretching associated with all of your hip complex first, and then work your way down towards your calf and your feet. So, first one we're going to start off with is very basic, simple knee to your chest, which each of these exercises I want you to hold them for a minute each. You can break that up into 2 sets of 30 seconds per side if you want. I'm not going to hold it for very long just for time. This one you'll probably feel a little gentle stretch sometimes in your hamstring, also your glutes and your low back. Next stretch, you're going to cross a leg over and you're going to gently press on that knee. And this one you'll experience a little bit more of a stretch in your hip itself. If this does not produce a stretch for you, then you're going to grab a hold of the opposite leg and pull it up this way. So these are the 2 different variations. If you feel a stretch in your hip here, then this is enough. If not, grab a hold of the opposite leg, pull your knee up toward your chest. Next stretch, we're working a little bit more on the glutes. You're going to start off with that same setup with your legs are crossed. You're going to grab a hold of your knee. You're going to pull it towards your opposite shoulder and up towards your chest at the same time. This will produce more of a stretch in your glutes and your piriformis. For me, it just feels better to do all these stretches while I'm laying on my back as opposed to doing maybe some yoga poses. Everybody's different though, so it's whatever works best for you. Don't forget, each one of these stretches, hold for a minute or 2 sets of 30 seconds for each. You can hold them longer if you want, but a minute is kind of the magic number. Now, for your hamstrings, I recommend like a yoga strap or a rope. Hook it on the bottom of your foot. Have that leg fairly straight. The other knee, I want it bent, so that way you're stabilizing your hip. And then you're going to pull that up. You can also play around a little bit. If you move your toe towards your knee, you'll get a little bit of a nerve stretch and calf stretch there. If you point it the other way, you could probably go a little bit further. I think that this is probably the safest way you can stretch your hamstring without affecting or compensating through your back and your hips. So that's one way to stretch your hamstrings. We're going to show you another way here in just a second. So after you go through all of those, then I recommend we start working on your hip complex, your hip flexors, nice and tall. With the hip that's down, I want that glute muscle to be engaged and squeezed. And then you just lightly rock forward. I want you to think about this whole section of your body. You're trying to lengthen it. And imagine that if this is your hip and this is your femur, you're kind of trying to pull those 2 apart as you're rocking forward. It will produce a stretch down through the front part of your leg. Again, you want to hold that for a minute. I personally like to use the yoga block. It just feels a little bit better on my knees. Glute is tight, pulling up nice and tall. Rock forward. Get that stretch come down the front part of that thigh. Now, from this same position, we can do another stretch that will incorporate a little bit more of the hamstrings. going from this position. The other foot's going to be out in front of you a little bit further than what it was before, and you're just going to go ahead and just drop down and get your shoulder to go on the inside of that knee. You're going to feel a really good stretch there in that hamstring. Holding that for a minute. Typically I feel this stretch a little bit more than I do with the yoga strap laying on my back. Okay, one more final one using the block. Now that we've went through and we've stretched your hip flexors a little bit, we also want to incorporate the quads as well. So with this one, what you're going to want to do is you want to grab a hold of that ankle. Same thing, you're going to squeeze that glute. Gently pull up, nice and tall. You'll get a little bit more of an intense stretch going down through the front part of your quad. Okay, so we went front and back. We've also gotten your glutes. The only other stretch that I'd recommend before you move on to your calf muscles would be a little gentle adductor stretch where you're pushing down with your elbows and you're stretching the inside of your thighs. Again, with that one, you want to hold it for a minute. As you can tell, I'm not that flexible. And then the only other stretch that I'd recommend would be a calf stretch. Two different ways. Knee is fairly straight. Sometimes it helps if you put something up underneath your foot. A yoga block is probably a little bit too tall, but you'll get the idea. Something about half that size would work that much better. And with that stretch, with that knee being straight like that, you're going to feel the stretch more up in the belly, up tall. But we got two different muscles there we want to stretch. That's the gastrocnemius. The next one we want to stretch is you want that knee to be bent and then rock forward. And it's the muscle on the outside there that underlies the gastrocnemius, and that's your soleus. And that one you'll feel a little bit more of a stretch down towards your Achilles. Again, it might help if you prop up your foot a little bit. This is the stretch that everybody used to always do when you're pushing up against the wall. Okay, with all of these stretches, make sure that you're warmed up before you do them. And then what I'd recommend that you do is after you go through all your stretches, then you can go through and foam roll any tight spots. So, if you have any questions, you can contact me at davedutro@gmail.com. Thanks again.